My parents sold my childhood home without telling me, and then asked to move in. They say you can't go home again. I just didn't think that phrase would become literal. It started with a phone call from a stranger. "Hi, is this Ashley Pierce?" Was in my office, sipping what was left of my cold coffee, about to dive into another stack of quarterly reports. Speaking. "This is Rachel. I'm the real estate agent handling the property at 408 Sycamore Avenue. I just wanted to confirm the time for the open house this Saturday." I blinked. Sycamore Avenue? My heart did a little flip, the kind that happens right before something crashes. "I'm sorry. What property?" She paused. 408 Sycamore. The listing went up last week. That's my parents' house. "Oh, well, they're listed as the owners. They didn't tell you?" "No, they didn't." I ended the call as politely as I could, then stared at the wall behind my computer like it might offer an explanation. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe they were refinancing. Maybe the agent was wrong. Spoiler, she wasn't. Drove there that evening, heart thudding like a warning drum. I hadn't lived there in nearly a decade, but that house was stitched into my memory. The front porch where I broke my arm jumping off the railing. The maple tree with the tire swing. Dad hung himself. Wait, no. He hung for me. The windows were dark when I arrived, but there it was. A lockbox on the door. A goddamn lockbox. I used the spare key from the fake rock beside the flower bed. My fingers trembled as I turned it. The door creaked open like it always had, but it smelled wrong, like fresh paint and lemon-scented cleaning spray. And emptiness. The family photos were gone. The old couch where I lost my virginity during senior prom night, replaced with a beige sectional that screamed rental staging furniture. I stood in the living room, in stunned silence. Not just because the place looked like a sterile Airbnb, but because my parents had done all this without telling me. I didn't even get a heads up. Not a single word. I found out from a stranger. And here's the kicker. I was the only child. No siblings. No family drama. Nothing that would explain this level of radio silence. I texted my mom. No response. Then I called her, straight to voicemail. So, I did what any mature, well-adjusted adult would do. I drove straight to their condo, the one I helped them co-sign 4 years ago when my dad's business tanked and they needed temporary help. They answered the door in matching bathrobes. "Oh," Mom said, blinking like I was a raccoon that wandered onto her porch. "Hi, honey." Dad gave me that awkward half-hug like we weren't related. "Everything okay?" "You sold the house," I said. Silence. Then Mom glanced at Dad. "Well, yes. We meant to tell you." "You meant to?" She gave this little shrug, like it was a restaurant reservation they forgot to mention. "It all happened so fast. The market's crazy right now." "So you didn't think to call me?" "Well, sweetie, you live in the city now," she said, like that explained anything. "You've moved on. We figured it wasn't a big deal." I laughed. Loudly. In that sharp, humorless way that makes people uncomfortable. It was my childhood home. Mom frowned. "Well, yes, but it's just a house, Ashley." I should have walked away, but I was too stunned, too angry, too curious. "So, where are you moving?" More awkward glances. Dad scratched his neck. "Actually, we were hoping to stay with you for a bit." It hit me like a punch to the throat. "Excuse me?" "Well," Mom chimed in, "you've got that lovely guest room, and your lease is up on the condo. It just made sense. Until we find something permanent." I stared at them, trying to connect the dots, but all I saw was red. They'd sold my childhood home. Without a word. And now they wanted to crash at my place like some Craigslist roommates. I don't remember what I said. I think I nodded. I told them I'd think about it. What I do remember is the rage humming in my skull as I drove home. The betrayal sitting heavy on my chest. The fact that they had erased my past, then tried to bulldoze into my present like it was nothing, and here's where things get interesting. I decided not to explode. Not yet. Because if there's one thing my parents never taught me, but should have, it's this. Don't screw with someone who knows how to hold a grudge. The next day, I called Rachel, the real estate agent. "Hi," I said sweetly. "I'd like to schedule a private showing of 408 Sycamore. Just me. No family." She hesitated. "Aren't you—" "Yes," I said. "But I'd still like the appointment." It was scheduled for Friday at noon. I walked through the house like I was shopping for revenge, touched the walls, opened the closet where I used to hide during thunderstorms, looked at the bathroom door I once slammed so hard it cracked, and then I made a few calls, to a friend who's a probate lawyer, to another who's a home inspector, to a guy I once dated who flips houses for fun and petty profit. See, what my parents didn't realize is that the house was never just a house. It was leverage. Memories don't just evaporate. They root themselves in drywall and stained carpet and attic corners full of secrets, and if they wanted to erase me from it, fine, but they'd underestimated how good I am at returning the favor. The next time I visited them, I brought cupcakes. Chocolate ones with salted caramel frosting. Mom loves those. "Thought I'd make peace," I said, setting them on the counter. She looked surprised. "Oh, honey, that's so thoughtful." We sat. We ate. We talked about the weather, about the buyer who was very interested in the house, about how fast things were moving. And then I smiled. The kind of smile that means nothing and everything. "I have a surprise, too," I said. Dad looked up, licking frosting from his finger. "Oh, yeah?" "I'm buying the house." Silence. Utter, heavy, thunderous silence. Mom blinked. "What?" I sipped my coffee. "You heard me. I made an offer this morning. Full asking price. Cash." "But—" She glanced at Dad, who was already pale. "You don't even want to live there." "I don't," I said, standing. "But you see, neither do you." That's when it started to click, and that's when the panic started to settle behind their eyes. But this was only the beginning. Because when you try to erase someone from their roots, you'd better be ready for the consequences, especially when that someone just bought the shovel. I expected screaming. Or at least a dramatic, "How could you?" from my mother, followed by some classic passive-aggressive silent treatment. But they just sat there, stunned, like they couldn't quite wrap their heads around what I'd said. "I'm sorry," Dad finally muttered. "You bought the house?" I nodded. "Full cash offer. Went through this morning. I waived the inspection. I know the place better than anyone." Mom blinked rapidly. But we already had an interested buyer." I smiled. "Yeah, me. It turns out, the buyers they were so excited about, they'd backed out 3 days ago. But my parents, being ever the delusional optimists, decided not to tell anyone, especially not me. Maybe they thought they'd wait for a bidding war. Maybe they thought the universe owed them a miracle. Well, the universe delivered something else. Me. I stayed, long enough to watch them squirm. It was better than therapy. "Anyway," I said, grabbing my coat, "you're welcome to keep the cupcakes." And I left. That night, they blew up my phone. First it was texts. "We need to talk. This is insane. You're being irrational." Then came the calls. I didn't answer. I was busy. Too busy clearing out the guest room they wanted to move into. Not because they were coming, because they weren't. Let's rewind a little. When I left the house that night, I already had a plan. See, buying the house wasn't the end game. Not even close. That was just step 1. Emotional checkmate would take a bit more finesse. So I made a list. Step 1, buy the house. Done. Step 2, cancel their move into my apartment. Swiftly. Step 3, make sure they knew they were not invited to anything anymore. Not my life, not my space, not my future. I texted them the next morning. "Ashley, after some thought, I've decided it's not a good idea for you to move in. I need space right now. Mom, Ashley, we already gave notice at the condo. Ashley, then I suggest you start packing." Brutal? Maybe. But considering they sold the literal foundation of my childhood without so much as a warning, I figured we were beyond hugs and forgiveness. Meanwhile, I returned to Sycamore. It was strange walking through that house knowing it was mine now. Not in the nostalgic, sentimental way, but in the cold, transactional sense. I owned the place. I could bulldoze it if I wanted, but I didn't. No, I had something much better in mind. I hired a moving company. 2 guys named Dale and Ron who reeked of weed and had more tattoos than teeth. I loved them instantly. Want it all out? Ron asked, pointing at the stack of boxes my parents had left in the garage. Every last piece. We cleared out every leftover item they'd stashed there in the hopes of coming back for it later. Old photo albums, a Christmas tree stand, a box labeled Ashley's baby clothes that I shoved straight into a donation pile. Not because I didn't care. Because I did. Too much. I wasn't about to preserve the relics of a childhood they so carelessly erased. When the place was finally empty, I hired a stager to make it look like something straight out of an architectural digest. Spread. Mid-century modern everything. Light, clean, emotionless. The opposite of what it used to be. Then I relisted it. Yep, I bought it just to resell it. But this time, I made a very specific change to the listing. Right at the bottom, bold and clear. No previous owners will be allowed on the property after sale. Strict enforcement. Petty? Sure, but effective. The next time I saw my parents was by their invitation. They asked to meet at a diner near the condo they were being evicted from in less than 2 weeks. I went. For the drama. Mom looked worn. Dad looked 10 years older. They were already seated when I arrived. 2 coffees in, both staring at the table like it might give them answers. Ashley, Mom said as I slid into the booth, we need to talk. You keep saying that, I replied, opening the menu, and yet nothing new ever comes out of your mouths. Dad sighed. We didn't think it would hurt you this much. Well, congratulations. It did. We thought you didn't care about the house anymore, Mom said. You never visited. I didn't visit because every time I walked in, you treated me like a stranger in my own home. Silence. I didn't know I needed to submit a formal visitation request to feel welcome, I added. Silly me. Mom's lips trembled. We were hoping to fix things. We just need a place for a few weeks. And if I hadn't bought the house? I asked. Where were you planning to go then? Dad swallowed hard. We didn't think we'd need to make that decision. No kidding. They looked so small sitting across from me. Smaller than I remembered. Parents always seem so big when you're a kid. But there comes a point when you realize they're just flawed people. Scared, impulsive, selfish people. And when that illusion breaks, it breaks hard. I'm not your safety net, I said finally. Not anymore. We're your parents, Mom whispered. Exactly, I said. You raised me to be independent. Guess what? You succeeded. They didn't argue after that. But the best part? The absolute chef's kiss to this entire saga? I sold the house, not to just anyone, to a young couple, first-time buyers, newlyweds with a golden retriever and a Pinterest board full of home improvement dreams. And you know what I did with the profit? I bought a condo, not for me, for them, my parents. A 1-bedroom unit, 3rd floor, no elevator, in a building full of retirees who complain when you flush after 10 p.m. I paid the first 6 months' rent in full. Then I handed them the lease. What's this? Mom asked, unfolding the paper. Your new home. You bought us a condo? Technically, I rented it, on a short-term lease. But it's all covered. Consider it a goodbye gift. Mom looked like she was going to cry. Ashley, I don't want you in my apartment. I don't want you in my life. But I'm not heartless. You'll have a roof over your head. Dad sat in silence, staring at the paper. And after 6 months? Mom asked, barely audible. After that, you're on your own. Like I was when you sold the house without telling me. Then I stood up, pulled out my phone, and snapped a photo of them holding the lease. Why would you do that? Mom asked. For the memory, I said with a smirk, since you're so good at erasing mine. And I walked out. 2 weeks later, I attended the open house. Not my open house. That had already happened. My buyers had closed the deal faster than expected, and were now painting the living room a color called hushed linen, which is basically beige for people with a subscription to Architectural Digest. No, This open house was at my parents' new condo complex. Before you clutch, your pearls know. I didn't crash their place. I was there for another reason, but we'll get to that. Let's rewind a bit. After I handed them the lease to their new, temporary beige and linoleum reality, I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't. I felt hollow, like eating an entire cake and realizing it was made of air. Sweet at first, but disappointing as hell. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through the box of childhood junk I didn't throw out. Yes, I lied. I kept one. It wasn't full of teddy bears or finger paintings. It was full of paperwork, letters, report cards. A handmade I'm sorry card from when I broke Mom's vase at age 7 and tried to glue it back with toothpaste. At the bottom was a drawing I did in 3rd grade. Me, standing in front of the house, holding hands with cartoon versions of my parents. Above us, in crooked bubble letters, I had written, "Home is where your people are." 8-year-old me was a liar, but a hopeful one. I sat on the floor and stared at that picture for a long time. And that's when I decided on the final phase of my plan. I wouldn't just exile them. I would make them watch me build something better. It started with a dinner invitation, from me, to them. I sent it via email, with a little RSVP button like it was some kind of gala event. Subject: dinner. 1 night only. Dress code: truth. Shockingly, they replied. Mom sent one of those, "Thanks for the invitation," canned responses like we were co-workers. The night of, I rented out the rooftop of a chic restaurant downtown. Twinkle lights. A view of the skyline. A jazz trio playing in the background, because nothing screams, "You messed up," like a sad saxophone. They arrived looking confused and hopeful. My mother wore pearls. Pearls. Like this was going to end in reconciliation. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. I greeted them with hugs, sat them down, ordered wine. They looked like they didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. "I wanted to share some news," I said, clinking my glass for dramatic effect. They perked up. Hooked. Predictable. "I'm buying a new place," I said. Mom gasped. "Ashley, that's wonderful." Dad nodded. "Somewhere near the old house?" "No. Actually, it is the old house, but not ours. Not the one on Sycamore." They blinked. "I bought Grandma June's place," I said. "Remember? The one with the orchard? It came back on the market." Mom's face changed instantly. That house was sacred. My grandma's pride and joy. My safe haven every summer. "You're buying it?" she asked, her voice uneven. "Yes," I said, "and renovating it, turning it into a studio space and a home. For me, for people who choose me." Dad cleared his throat. "That's a lot of land for one person." "I'm not one person," I said. "I've got friends, a partner, a found family, you know. The people you ignored for 20 years because they weren't church friends or real estate clients." Mom opened, her mouth to protest. I raised a hand. "Don't. Tonight isn't about guilt. It's about closure." The food arrived. Steak for Dad, salmon for Mom, and a vegan risotto for me because I enjoy irony. We ate in awkward silence for a bit. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out 2 envelopes. "This is for you," I said, handing one to each of them. "What's this?" Mom asked. "An invitation," I said, "to an open house." Mom smiled weakly. "Ashley, we already saw the place." I shook my head. "Not that open house. This one's at the new place, my place. It's for people who've supported me, helped me get here. You're not on the guest list. I just thought it would be educational to know what you're missing." Dad looked like he might cry. Mom didn't blink. "You're being cruel," she said. "No," I replied. "You were cruel. I'm just making it symmetrical." I stood, tossed my napkin on the table. "This is the last dinner we'll have together," I said. "From now on, I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your retirement home. I'm not your emotional punching bag." "But we're family," Dad said softly. I turned back to face them. "No," I said. We were. The open house was magical. Friends, coworkers, neighbors from the community garden. Even my high school art teacher showed up. We laughed, we toasted, we walked the land. Inside, I'd turned the old farmhouse into a blend of studio and sanctuary. Light, warm wood, a reading nook, a massive art table in the middle of what used to be Grandma's dining room. I didn't tell anyone about the final touch until after dessert. There was a small door near the stairs, the old broom closet. I'd had it converted into a private archive. Inside, everything I'd ever salvaged from my old life. Photos, the toothpaste vase, the crooked "Home is where your people are" drawing. Framed. It was a monument. Not to them, to me, to what I'd survived. Later that night, my best friend pulled me aside. "Think they'll ever come around?" she asked. I shrugged. "Doesn't matter." "Don't you miss them?" I sipped my wine. Let the wind move through my hair. "Sometimes," I said. "But I miss the idea of them, not the reality." And that's the thing, isn't it? We spend our lives chasing the version of people we wish existed,